prototyping is one of those really fun stages of making a game where if you know a few tips and tricks, you can just pretty much anything that can appear in your mind will just form in front of your eyes really quickly. It's the stage that I personally love the most because you can just be really creative, and if you do it in a style that's sort of like iterative prototyping, where you have a core prototype and then you just switch things in and out as you change them and upgrade them and update them and add and remove things, then yeah, it can be sort of actually really quite cost effective. So what I'll be doing is going through 4 basic tips for sort of going from very, very first initial stage prototyping, also very budget prototyping, up to something that's a bit more sort of manufacturer level quality. So from something a bit like this, where it's just a bunch of stuff, could just be in a plastic bag, all the way up to something like this, which was the virtual reef diver prototype, final manufacturer grade prototype, and I'll tell you where to get that, which is, as you can see, pretty much indistinguishable from the final copy, except for a few kind of color grade issues and obviously some plastic coating and stuff like that. So yeah, let's get stuck in. So the 4 main steps that I'm going to go through are printing at home or at work, where to get bits and pieces for your prototypes, so like dice and meeples and cubes and whatever else you need. I'm also going to printing at your local, like printing sort of higher grade prototypes at things like your local print store or Officeworks here in Australia, or Staples, I think, is an American company if you're from that side of the world. And then also I'll talk about how to make some tips for making your first manufacturing grade copy, because there's a couple of services out there in the world that can allow you to do that. So with printing at home and work, you can actually make entire board games just based on A4 pieces of paper, and they can be black and white. The thing about early stage game prototyping is that it's mostly about the, like, does everything fit together and can we easily change it? That's the most important thing. A lot of people might, and I certainly did when I started out, like jump in going, oh cool, like I've had a really good idea, here's how I think it's all going to go together, put heaps and heaps of work into fully arting the thing, or prototype arting, and like by all means please do that. Like start purchasing or creating art of your own as soon as you can. Like I enjoy doing that, but the easier that you can change things is probably better, because it'll just, there's always going to be a process, especially when you start showing people the prototypes, of changing and adjusting and editing things. So if it's just sort of starting out, you're not exactly sure how it's going to work, maybe something like this, just a bunch of pieces of paper in a box, and I can show you how to make a box really easily, is probably better than going for something like this, which is there's a lot of stuff in here, full of bits and pieces and things like that. So this was sort of a pre-manufactured grade copy, because we couldn't afford manufactured grade copies of this, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So you can use A4 pieces of paper. What I generally like to do is get your A4 piece of paper, okay, and then grid it into 8 slices, which are your cards. And then I always use PowerPoint, but you can use sort of whatever graphics tool you have, if you have Illustrator or Photoshop, or I wouldn't recommend Word, but I mean, I'm sure it can be done. And yeah, like use size adjustment tools to make them 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and just 8 of those. And that's often the foundation of many board games, is just having some decks of cards. What you can do is, so if you have that in landscape, then the next page can be the opposite side of that. So you just have to remember that when they print, it's going to be, does that make sense? It's going to be the opposite, left to right is going to be right to left in terms of the order of the cards. But I'll provide a template. But the main thing is just playing around with it, and you'll figure out sort of how to print it. So you can do that. You can also build like quite gigantic boards out of just printed pieces of paper. That's probably going to be a bit challenging to do with your printer, because as they print out, the things might not line up exactly, but you can always just staple some paper together and then draw on it. And then that will help you know, when you're then creating ones to print through the printer, where things should be on each page. And obviously, not so obviously, sorry. Then you can go up to, if you want to do like a full-size map, that's probably, for most people, where you're going to have to start using local print stores or organizations to do your sort of A3, A2, and A1 kind of, A3, A2, A1 kind of boards and things like that. So yes, so my general tips are use icons, use things that are easily differentiated if they're in black and white. If you want to use color, if you've got access to a color printer, like maybe you're doing a little bit of printing at work, not that I do, I'm just saying some people may, definitely use that. Because like the other thing about aesthetics is that it can really help you figure out, like, is this theme cool? Do people like the theme? Do they like the colors? Do they, if it's like pirates, if there's pirate art everywhere, does that, do people like that? So definitely give it a go. But yeah, so my general tips for printing at home and at work are just do everything on a full page, draw if you need to, and just cut up bits and pieces of paper. It doesn't all need to look perfect at this stage, you just need to try and sort of figure out, does the gameplay work? One other thing is, if you want to make, if you don't have access to card, you can actually just print pages and stick them together. You just print it all single-sided, and that'll, usually printed paper is about 80 GSM. GSM is the thickness of the paper. A standard playing card is going to be 300 to 380 GSM, so quite thick. But your printer paper, if you just fold it over, it bumps it up to 160, which feels really good, and it actually makes it kind of more durable. So you just fold the page in half, or stick 2 pages together, glue it, cut it out. Things look great. That can help you practice with your alignment as well, when you're learning how to align the things that you print out of the printer. Next is where to get bits and pieces. So if you have them, pillage other board games mercilessly. Like, that's what I used to do. I used to get dice and like bits and pieces, and it meant that those board games weren't, able to be played with necessarily all the time, because I'd forget where bits and pieces are. But if you're using generic things like little meeples, which are the little people-shaped tokens, or figurines, or cubes, or just things like that, you just use them from other games, and then if you need them again, you can just put them back. You can also use, I've used things like coins before, coins and just little bits of paper. But if we're talking about sort of industry grade, like the ones you would find in published board games, the best place to go is the Game Crafter. Alright, so you can buy bulk, awesome like kits of everything you need. It's really cool. And in any game design group, if you're on Facebook or on or if you know a group of people that does game design as well, you could always just ask them, like, hey, did you ever buy 1,000 cubes or something and then never use them? And a lot of people actually say yes, because we get very excited about projects and then have a bunch of stuff lying around. eBay's probably a good place to get those things. So most of it, so what I'm saying is you can buy a lot of these things online. You can also go to shops, secondhand stores, like St. Vincent de Paul or Salvation Army, and they may have some board games that you can take and pilfer, or yeah. But honestly, I used to make games with rocks as the resource tokens, and we're just spending them. It was actually kind of fun because it felt really weighty. And I just painted them different colors, so just use whatever you have around you. If you need a dice and you don't have any dice, there's lots of rollers on the internet. If you're prototyping and you're demoing the game with people in real life, playtesting, yeah, people don't mind using an app dice roller. If it feels better to have dice, but like that's fine. So, where to get some bits and pieces, I would just recommend secondhand stores, online, secondhand stuff, and just no one will mind if you use just whatever you have on hand. So next is going to be printing at a local print shop, or sort of one of those bulk office work supply places. So these can be kind of tricky because their turnaround is going to be longer. It's usually going to be hard to get anything the same day unless you've known them for a while. But it's really good if you're trying it. Oh, also, sometimes the print settings that you use at home or wherever you're doing your printing for your own personal home, like initial prototype things, won't come out on their printers quite as well. So I would always, until you get a good working relationship and you sort of know how they print stuff and you've got a bit of an understanding, I would recommend doing a black and white draft first, which might be frustrating because then that's a day and then you have to go back and do another day, and if you're in a rush to get to a convention or a playtesting weekend, just I'm not going to say just do it, but like, it's okay if sometimes the backs of the cards are the wrong way up relative to the front of the card, that's fine. But yes, so you just have to realize it's going to take more time. And the friendlier you can be to them and sort of use the same place consistently, it's like anything really, you start to learn the person that's behind the counter and they sort of learn you. So a print shop that I use here in Brisbane, the owner and I, we've done something like maybe like 50 prototypes together, and she knows nowadays that all the stuff I sent through pretty much would need to be lightened by about 10%, made 10% brighter, just because my computer screen makes it look darker and all this kind of stuff. So if I forget to mention that, she'll do it. She'll call me up and say, hey, wait a second, like usually you have this size and stuff, like is that correct? That can be really good because with like a second like it's like a double check with someone who usually knows how you work and how you put things together. So that can be really good. Yes, so I like these print stores also have generally 280 or 300 GSM card, and I would really recommend starting to use that. So it's a bit more expensive, but the quality that you get from it is just awesome. So I'll show you an example of what I mean. So this is well, I don't know if you can see. So this is a card from a game that I made about animals fighting each other. So that's nice and thick. Okay, this is the 300 GSM card. And this is a card from the factory for a virtual roof diver game. Okay, they are pretty much the same. Okay, the finish is a bit different, the gloss is a bit different. This is just one type of paper all the way through. This is 3 layers of paper. Okay, that are, because playing cards, and poker playing cards especially, poker size ones, usually have a coloured strip on top, a colour page on top, a colour page on bottom, and then in the centre what's called a blue or a black core. So what that does is it actually makes it harder for the light to get through. Okay, so like hypothetically you could see through this. I mean, if you're prototyping, who really minds, but you definitely, I can actually literally see the stuff on the other side. But I mean, this is a blue or a black core, and I can see a little bit of what's, I can see that. But it's a lot harder through this, so, don't worry too much about that, especially in the prototyping stages, because, I mean, most playtesting groups are going to be sort of friendly and sympathetic to your cause and not pull you up on that kind of thing. It is important in your final manufactured product that, we work with the standards, but we can do that for now. Another thing I recommend is when you're making with local paper and print companies, is you can make things that are like from 1.5 to 3 millimeters thick. Okay, so that's where we're getting into actual board game like tokens. So the cardboard tokens that you might have in a bunch of different games. the way I make them is I will get, it's a bit tricky. So I'll try and kind of explain this. Okay, so for these hex tiles that I made, you could have circle or square tiles or just player boards or whatever you need. This is more for the advanced tabletop mechanics kind of part, which I will have had explained in a previous video. What I usually do is I get a from the print shop a 1.5mm piece of card. They usually come in quite large, quite sort of like A2 size, and then print off a page of what's called bond paper. So it's like cheaper paper, but the colors still look really good. But it's like, I don't know what GSM. It's just cheaper for some reason, but looks awesome. So we get two sides of that, and we'll actually glue that on the back of front and back of the cards. All the cards assembled in one spot, and then yeah, print that off and cut it up. And it doesn't align perfectly all the time because it is a bit of a, you can see that. You can see the got a bit of other card there, and there's a line that shouldn't be there, but in general, especially if you focus on like the front facing, which has the most important information, it's going to look pretty good. So that's another tip, and that's another thing you can do at the print shop. I've never met a print shop that will do that for me, like glue front and back, but it doesn't take very long to do, especially just with glue sticks and going back and forth. You can even get some liquid glue and a little kind of paintbrush and coat that and then put it on, press it down, do that kind of thing as well. So your local print stores, especially if you stick with the same one, I would recommend going with a local one that might be again a little more expensive than like a bulk chain like Staples or Officeworks, but in the end you're going to get more of a symbiotic relationship with them, and the result will be better. But absolutely, like, if you need to, just print wherever you can get and to whatever your budget is. And I think now we can go on to the manufacturer grade copies. So the ones I've been talking about so far, so a standard sort of deck in black and white will cost you maybe $8. Oh, actually no, I made this giant board game, for $8. So I think just a standard 54 card deck, if that's what you're doing, and then you assemble all your little pieces from other sources or other board games, it can cost you maybe $4. The full color ones, so something like this, which has full color cards, boards, all that kind of stuff, using those techniques I was talking about, might cost you about between $30 and $80, which is a lot. But something like this, all right, which is the prototype from a site called makeplayingcards.com. They're really good. I can very highly recommend it. It just has a digital online interface where you can upload cards, and they show you the fronts and backs, and you just upload to the dimensions. They can do boxes, they can do all types of shapes of cards. Not sponsored or anything, but that's where I generally do them. You can also go through the Game Crafter, as I've said before, but their prototypes aren't quite as good. For example, these ones have the sort of white insert, and it's quite, it's sturdy, like it's manufacturer grade quality. This might set you back about $50 for this, and then this is all Australian money as well, sorry. So $50 Australian for one deck of cards, and about $30 to $40 to get it over here. Now that's just one card deck, so it's like, oh, it's the same cost, but no. So that's just for one deck of cards. But if you were doing something that was sort of this scale or this scale through Make Playing Cards, it would cost around $200 Australian, which is about 150 US, I think. So yeah, it's probably, and doing something of this scale would be about $30 to $80 Australian. So it just depends what your budget is, and you don't have the wait time if you do your local print store copies. But yeah, so this is great. This is really good when you get to the stage where like you've made a couple of copies at home and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, I sort of know how everything should look. I know how it all should be laid out. You'll likely end up doing 2 of these, so just keep that in mind, because the first one shows you all the things you did wrong, and the next one shows you all the things that you end up justifying to ignore. But yeah, you can get little rulebooks and stuff as well. So I would recommend Make Playing Cards because it also has templates for everything. So, and I will at some stage link or upload a video of the process of making a card game and a board game through Make Playing Cards, or I don't think there are any similar websites that I know of yet. Please correct me and message me if you know. But yes, general principles for that are that when they do the offset printing, which is on the big machines, your colors will come out darker. So you need to make everything look like a little bit bright on your computer screen before you send it, because the color is not going to be perfectly graded, and even brighter than the one that you do at home, because it's very deep color saturation into the paper, and then they coat it, and so it does that. I would also recommend, if possible, get to the stage where you would want like 4 or 5 copies, sorry, like 5 or 6 copies to start, doing little playtesting groups and things like that, because then you will get bulk discounts on each of them. But again, like depending on the size of your game, that might not be tenable, but that's okay. Yeah, I think that's about it. So that's for basic prototyping. Those are some techniques and things you can use. Also with Make Playing Cards and the Game Crafter, there's sometimes you might not even then have the full suite of components that you would like for your game, so you'll need to source them elsewhere and then put them into the box. So I would also recommend always going for a box size that's maybe a little bigger than you need. If you're going to have free components, like for a card deck you don't need it, but if you're going to have sort of like dice or tokens or chips or figurines, like just get a box that's like a bit bigger than you think you need, because a lot of the time that actually turns out to be the size of the box that you need, and you can always shrink it down later. So yeah, thanks for listening. This was probably the longest video I've done so far, and I hope just once again, print at home. You can get bits and pieces from secondhand, just from wherever, and just use whatever you have. You can get official pieces from Game Crafter. You can printing at your local little store is really good. I would recommend a smaller store, because you get to work almost one-on-one with someone, which is a bit better than gigantic stores. And they have a lot of specialized kind of paper types that you can use. And finally, MakePlayingCards.com is really good for doing manufacturer grade prototypes. So thanks for listening. The next video we're going to cover how to then rapidly iterate with the prototypes that you are making, both basic and a little more advanced.